This course is on the most critical aspect of building the Hygiene Revenue Center. It's called the active patient count. I'm going to go into this quite in some detail, but before we get started on the active patient count, you'll remember that the active patient count is built and grows by the four business laws feeding it: customer acquisition, consumer sales, consumer retention, and of course a positive experience. The number of people in that active patient count is what we're focused on. To build the Department of Hygiene requires a critical factor of administration. You cannot build any department or any business without adding administrative steps to put it in. This is in every single textbook that you can imagine on any MBA program. To get and grow a business, as it begins to grow, it has confusions that actually get entered in. The more confusions you have simply means one thing: you never put the administrative functions or a system in place to handle the increase in the growth. The same goes with the hygiene department. Most hygiene departments across the country are just neglected. And when I say neglected, is there's everybody in the office sort of works on it. Everyone's going to call the canceled appointment or call the reactivation. So let's focus on the most critical aspect of putting in any program into any business. If you're going to put a program into a business, I'm sure have had many things you wanted to get done in the past, and you try to put it in, it goes in for a while, then it falls back out again. You might want to put in a report line from your office manager where you get reports on every aspect of your office so that you have some way to manage it with some pretty simple statistics. But you can't get the reports, or they go in and then they fall back out again. Maybe the office manager has too many functions, too many duties, or maybe there's just not a system in place, or maybe there's something missing business-wise that you can't execute an idea or a concept or a program into that business. So the first step to handle a hygiene department, if we go back to the structure and you look at this diagram, you'll remember we have a structure with an office manager, a department of customer service, a finance department, a department of hygiene, and a department of operative dentistry. If you look at this diagram, the department of hygiene has a red circle around it, and it draws a line over to somebody in charge called a retention coordinator or a hygiene coordinator that is in charge of that department. If you give those duties to an office manager, an assistant, or the dental hygienist, the program will fail. Not maybe. In the last 3.5 to 4 months, I have been to 33 to 34 different offices in Manhattan, New Jersey, Florida, Dallas, Houston, Sacramento, different cities in California, Seattle. What did we go look for? We looked at offices to see why the program would not go into execution. And one for one, the offices that have good progress versus the ones that have almost no progress or minor progress, they were missing the department head, which is this red person leading that department. Now, you might wonder and say, well, do I need another staff member for that? Well, ask yourself a question. Do you want to grow the department or not? Because I can tell you, unless you put somebody in charge of that department, that is the person that we're going to train and teach the administrative functions. There's forms to fill out. There's duties to do. There's reactivation occur. There's confirmation appointments. There's cancellations. As you go through these lessons, you'll see the administrative duties unfold. They're all downloadable as PDFs. They're easy to track on an Excel spreadsheet. You can put it onto a desktop in any office. That retention coordinator, or call it a hygiene coordinator, is the person that administrates this department as a revenue center. So yes, you'll probably spend $25,000, $30,000 a year to build a department that can do $300,000, $600,000, $800,000, $1 million, $1.2 million, $1.5 million a year before you pick up a handpiece. So if you try to do it haphazardly and don't put somebody in charge of it, you're going to have a problem growing this department and getting the administration done. That being said, you can have a compromise when you're starting, because the office manager herself, which is usually the right-hand person of the doctor, is pretty critical in building this department. She should know the functions and administrative duties as well as the hygiene coordinator and or the retention coordinator. Now, I call it a retention coordinator because it's a bit of a better name. You can call it a hygiene coordinator, whatever you want to call it. A retention coordinator tells you what she's actually doing. The post title tells you that the retention coordinator is coordinating the retention of your consumer. For every person that walks in that front door, she's going to be the person, or he's going to be the person responsible so they don't go out the back door. If you're losing 90% of the consumers coming in, how do we actually stop the leakage of those consumers? So you need to have a retention coordinator with administrative functions, much like what this diagram shows, to take you through the growth period on this strategy that we're actually beginning to implement into the office. It's unbelievably rewarding to see it, because the most fascinating part of building a hygiene department, which excites almost every hygienist I've ever met, is that the care factor for that patient becomes the best in the world. If you can have your consumers and your patients come back on a routine basis, their dentistry begins to reduce and go to almost zero. What does it mean for them? So let's get back to the purpose of the actual hygiene retention program. Yes, we talk about revenue. Yes, we talk about growing the department as a business. They're very secondary, because these administrative functions actually put in the highest patient care that you can imagine. Imagine if you have a child and your child is 8, 9 years of age. Imagine that child growing up being under the care of a good retention program or wellness program in a dental office. And imagine that child growing up to 18 years of age and leaving the household, never seeing the end of a needle. Now, is that an achievable goal? Well, it's one that I would certainly hope we can achieve, and you're not always going to achieve it. But if the Department of Hygiene and the Wellness Program has a protocol, and it's a wellness protocol, then an adolescent or teenager would never enter that office without leaving with sealants on all of their occlusals, their primary first molars that come in, their second molars that come in, bicuspids that have pits in them. How often? Every 2 years. Why? Because sealants wear out. What about fluoride treatments? Is it possible to actually reduce or eliminate dentistry on the consumer? It is with a wellness program. You're not always going to get there, and you certainly can't promise it, but it's a goal and purpose. And with that in mind, the administrative functions have a reason behind them. And the reason isn't just so the department makes more revenue. The revenue comes about from running a wellness program to service the patient with the highest care factor that's possible. That's really our wish. Let's take up the next subject here, and the next subject on how do we take the administrative functions and what are the forms and policies and actions that this retention coordinator or hygiene coordinator puts into place.